there are some Democrats who have been at this level. If this is a 10, they've been at a 10 for a while now. But there are some people, and I think one of them is the person that Ezra Klein was talking to in that podcast, Radley Balco, and even President Obama, who have been kind of reluctant to go there. But they're going there now. I mean, do you see that shift happening?
Definitely.
Now let's talk about what went down in a federal courtroom recently, because it could really be the beginning of the end for Donald Trump's presidency. A federal judge, someone with a lifetime appointment and no political ties, took a good look at what Trump and his cabinet have been up to and dropped the word authoritarian, which is a huge deal for a judge to say. This judge didn't hold back. He also said that Trump's own cabinet secretaries, people handpicked by him, have been involved in an unconstitutional conspiracy to violate Americans' rights. Just to emphasize that, a federal judge made a formal statement accusing the Trump cabinet of conspiring against the Constitution of the United States.
You see complete moral collapse of the United States government. The cabinet meeting with 3.5 hours of superficial praise is so cringeworthy. He's attacking the Fed. He's attacking all of our institutions. He's eliminating FEMA. It is horrifying that he is putting troops against American citizens because he claims that he's the law and order president.
This isn't just some hot take on cable news or a dramatic opinion piece in the papers. We have an official record with this ruling, clearly showing that the top officials in this administration are trampling on the First Amendment and stifling dissent, something you'd expect to see in a dictatorship, not in the United States. Now, I get that some of you might see the word resignation in the title and think I'm being overly dramatic, but hear me out. I'm going to walk you through the logic of what's happening right now, especially with federal courts repeatedly stepping in. You know, it's pretty wild when you think about how many times the administration has been caught in questionable actions, especially when those actions directly flout the Constitution.
Over the last several months, the investigative committees of the House have been engaged in an impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump's efforts to solicit foreign interference in the 2020 elections, efforts that compromised our national security and threatened the integrity of our elections.
Honestly, it's hard to imagine how Trump's position could remain stable politically or legally in the face of all this. We're not just talking hypothetical what-ifs here. It's a valid outcome after a president and his cabinet repeatedly stumble into legal trouble with courts that are meant to uphold the Constitution.
Throughout this inquiry, he has attempted to conceal the evidence from Congress and from the American people. Our president holds the ultimate public trust. When he betrays that trust and puts himself before country, he endangers the Constitution, he endangers our democracy, and he endangers our national security.
So, here's what went down and why it's significant. On the 15th of January this year, U.S. District Judge William Young delivered a ruling that shook up both the legal and political arenas. He pointed out, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the cabinet secretaries, and by extension the president, aren't really honoring the First Amendment. He specifically called out Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, accusing them of being part of an unconstitutional conspiracy to strip American citizens of their fundamental rights. I want to share some pretty shocking news about what's happening with Trump's cabinet.
A lot of people say that alarmism doesn't help Democrats, but there are also things happening that Trump is doing that are alarming even conservatives.
Well, alarmism alone doesn't do anything, and I think Democrats have gotten very good at correctly identifying the problem, naming the problem, whether it's fascism or authoritarianism. This is all true.
A federal judge who has spent decades on the bench recently stated that he has never seen anything like this before in his entire career. That's something that should definitely grab your attention. To have such an experienced judge say that the actions of Trump's senior cabinet officers are staggering and an abuse of power is significant, it's clear this isn't just bad policy or normal political disagreements. We're talking about a serious attack on the Constitution and the rights of every American, regardless of who's in the Oval Office. What's even more unsettling is that this isn't just a one-time event. Just days before this ruling, Another federal judge blocked important parts of Trump's anti-voting executive order.
Reagan-appointed senior judge William Young has a 40-year career presiding over some of the country's highest-profile cases. New reporting from the New York Times takes a look at how the 84-year-old is fast-tracking all the cases against Trump's executive orders that he can, but in a way that, quote, recalls a time when mutual respect and deference to the law were more standard in relations between the executive and judicial branches.
This judge determined that Trump had zero authority to change state election rules or link federal funding to his demands about how elections should operate. It feels like the courts are building a strong legal barrier around the administration. Every time Trump tries to push boundaries, the courts push back even harder. Now, it's no longer a question of whether Trump is overreaching. Clearly, he is. The bigger concern for everyone in Washington should be what happens when a president labeled an authoritarian by a federal judge continues to ignore rulings while his cabinet is implicated in what's being called an unconstitutional conspiracy.
He was an Army veteran. He's someone who's well respected, and he's just upset about what's going on. Clearly, through his words, he is taking on the Trump administration and is putting his foot on the pedal, unlike other judges like Judge Aileen Cannon, who seem to delay, paralysis by analysis. This judge wants to go and put things on the trial docket.
As these rulings pile up and he brushes them off, it's hard not to think about terms like resignation, impeachment, or the 25th Amendment. Those used to sound extreme, yet they're starting to feel a lot more plausible. Let's dive deeper into this situation because many folks are misunderstanding the gravity of what's unfolding. They see headlines about judges criticizing Trump and think it's just another typical story. But this moment is unlike anything we've seen before. It's not just one judge making a statement. This is part of a rapid trend where federal courts nationwide are calling out Trump and his administration. It's interesting to step back and take in the bigger picture, especially when it comes to the recent statements from Judge Young. He made a pretty serious ruling, one that should catch the attention of everyone, no matter their political leanings. The judge didn't just throw around some casual comments. He delivered a clear constitutional warning to the whole country. His words focus on something fundamental. He stated that Trump's cabinet members, such as Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, aren't upholding the First Amendment. Now, for anyone needing a little reminder, the First Amendment is basically the backbone of our freedoms. It guarantees the right to speak freely, protest, and criticize the government without fear of retaliation. The founders of our nation saw this as so crucial that it was the very first thing included in the Bill of Rights, because protecting against tyranny was their top priority. So, here we have a federal judge stating that Trump's own inner circle is potentially involved in actions that undermine this essential right. That's some pretty serious language, especially coming from a federal district judge. What makes it even more impactful is that this ruling is part of the legal record, meaning it could be referenced in future Supreme Court cases or even in impeachment discussions. Historians will likely look back on this and pinpoint it as a moment when the courts made it clear what was happening. It's a common misunderstanding for many to think that judicial criticism of a president is just some opinion from a judge. But let's be clear, when a federal judge issues a ruling with explicit facts and legal conclusions, it has real weight. This is not just idle chatter. It's a significant part of how the American legal system operates. So, here's the deal. When a federal judge steps in and declares that Trump's cabinet is involved in an unconstitutional conspiracy, it's not just some offhand comment. Judge Young's statement is a significant legal finding, and it sets a precedent. Other courts, Congress, and even prosecutors can use it to hold this administration accountable. This isn't simply one judge sharing an opinion. It's the judicial branch of the United States government officially saying that the executive branch is breaching the Constitution. When things reach this level of accusation between branches, the system is built to respond with consequences. Now, this ruling didn't come out of nowhere. Just days prior, another federal judge permanently blocked crucial parts of Trump's executive order on voting. This judge said Trump had no right to change state election rules, as those powers belong to the states according to the Constitution. Plus, trying to tie federal funding for elections to his personal agenda was deemed illegal. So within a week, we had 2 federal judges making it crystal clear Trump is breaking the law and stepping on constitutional rights. It's pretty striking when you consider that in 2 separate cases from different courts, both judges reached the same conclusion. Trump is overstepping his bounds, abusing his power, and violating fundamental rights. This pattern has been brewing for months, with court after court pushing back on Trump's executive orders and calling out his actions with increasingly strong language about the risks associated with this administration. This isn't just some oddball judge going rogue. It's the entire federal judiciary sending a clear and unified message that this president is crossing dangerous lines within a constitutional democracy. As we think about where this all heads, it's the part everyone in Washington is whispering about, but rarely saying outright. When a federal judge labels the president as authoritarian and points fingers at his cabinet for unconstitutional conspiracies, the stakes are incredibly high. It's really interesting how courts keep blocking this administration's actions, calling them illegal. It makes you think about what happens next. The focus shifts from whether Trump is overstepping to how the system will respond. There are only a few ways the Constitution suggests dealing with a president who consistently breaks the law and ignores the consequences. First up is impeachment. The House can vote to impeach, and then the Senate can decide whether to convict and remove the president. We've seen Trump go through this ordeal twice before, and he walked away unscathed both times thanks to his party support. But the political landscape seems a bit different these days. Some Republicans who once stood by him are starting to feel uneasy about the legal issues closing in. A few have started to openly disagree with him on specific matters, with courts delivering judgments that label actions as authoritarian and unconstitutional. The support for Trump is growing weaker each day. Then there's the 25th Amendment, which most people have heard of, but not many really get. Here's the straightforward idea. If the vice president and a majority of the cabinet believe the president can no longer perform his duties, they can send a written notice to Congress, and the vice president steps in as acting president. The president can fight it, but Congress has to vote. If 2/3 of both houses give their thumbs up, the president is effectively pushed aside. Now, you might wonder why Trump's cabinet filled with loyalists would ever choose to challenge him. That's a good question, but here's where it gets interesting. A federal judge just named specific cabinet members as participants in an unconstitutional conspiracy. This means those individuals now have personal legal exposure. They can no longer just hide behind orders. They've been specifically pointed out in a ruling about breaking the Constitution. When you start racking up legal troubles and judges are calling you out personally, opinions about loyalty to the president shift quickly. Suddenly, supporting Trump isn't just a political decision. It becomes a matter of whether you want to face legal trouble alongside him. History shows that when things get really risky for someone, loyalties can disappear quicker than you'd think. So, let's talk about resignation, which is what the title of this video hints at. I'm not predicting that Trump will resign first thing tomorrow morning, but I am pointing out that the situation we're in keeps pushing us in that direction. Federal courts are handing down some pretty tough rulings. Judges are throwing around terms like authoritarian and unconstitutional conspiracy, and the legal pressure is intensifying from every angle. It's clear that there is a logical endpoint to all of this, and resignation is definitely on that list. Just look at Richard Nixon. He didn't walk away willingly. He had the courts, Congress, and even his own party indicating that he couldn't continue on. While we aren't at that exact moment with Trump yet, each ruling, like the recent one from Judge Young, gets us a little closer. Every court that pushes back against Trump's actions makes his political standing a bit shakier. Plus, when judges formally accuse his cabinet of working to undermine the Constitution, it only strengthens the case for drastic actions, whether that's impeachment, the 25th Amendment, or resignation. So Let's break this down to the main takeaways that you really need to understand. It's one of those stories where the details matter a lot and could have huge implications for our future. First up, a federal judge has accused Trump's cabinet of being part of an unconstitutional conspiracy, which changes everything legally. This isn't just someone's opinion anymore. It's an official court finding. It shows that top officials in the Trump administration were conspiring to undermine Americans' constitutional rights. Judge Young specifically named Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, stating they were involved in a scheme to strip people of their First Amendment rights. He noted that this was the highest level of cabinet involvement in unconstitutional behavior he'd seen in his career, and described the administration's actions as staggering constitutional violations. When a federal judge makes a statement like this, it's serious business. When a judge uses such strong language in a ruling, it doesn't just vanish. It sticks around as part of the legal record. This means it can be referred to by other courts or even Congress, and might pave the way for more legal actions against certain officials. Not only that, but it sets a precedent, making it easier for future courts to hand down even tougher decisions if the same behavior persists. This ruling isn't just a light reprimand. It serves as a solid legal foundation that other institutions could rely on if they choose to take a stand against the current administration. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. This ruling reflects a growing trend of federal courts pushing back against what they see as Trump's unconstitutional overreach. It's not just an isolated incident. Just recently, 2 different federal judges issued significant rulings against him within a single week in January 2026. One judge even suggested that his cabinet was involved in an unconstitutional conspiracy against the First Amendment, while another permanently halted an executive order related to voting, which they deemed an illegal power grab. And these rulings are part of a much broader pattern that's been unfolding throughout Trump's second term. Federal courts around the country have been consistently overturning his executive orders, halting his attempts to interfere with state elections, and countering his efforts to silence criticism. The judiciary is delivering a clear message. This administration is stepping outside the constitutional limits, and each new ruling is like adding another brick to a legal wall surrounding Trump and his cabinet. Eventually, the cumulative weight of these rulings will be too substantial for Congress and the political climate to overlook, and we might be nearing that point sooner than many think. Additionally, the 25th Amendment and impeachment are constitutional tools designed precisely for situations like this, and the legal groundwork for both is currently in motion, regardless of whether people want to admit it. The 25th Amendment acts as a safeguard for moments when a president's actions become so extreme that quick governmental response is necessary. It requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to take action. Now, I know there's a belief that Trump's cabinet wouldn't go against him, but it's worth considering that several cabinet members have shown signs of dissent. Things are getting tense in Washington, and the situation is looking pretty grim for those involved. A federal court has directly named some cabinet members in a ruling, accusing them of acting unconstitutionally, and it seems like their legal troubles are piling up with each new decision. Eventually, loyalty to the president can only go so far when self-preservation takes over. History tells us that when the legal heat starts to rise, individuals often prioritize their own security over sticking by a leader. Impeachment may have its political hurdles, but those obstacles can shift based on public sentiment, the seriousness of the claims, and the strength of the legal evidence. Right now, all 3 elements are pointing toward a worsening situation for Trump. We're witnessing a constitutional crisis in the United States that is only escalating. A federal judge has referred to the president as authoritarian. Federal courts are consistently ruling actions taken by his administration as illegal and unconstitutional, and some cabinet members are accused of being part of unconstitutional conspiracies. What's striking is that the president shows no signs of changing his approach or acknowledging the rulings against him. This mix of an authoritarian leader, a willing cabinet, and a judiciary that's raising alarms is precisely what the founders of our nation worried about When they created mechanisms like impeachment and the 25th Amendment, they foresaw that a president might attempt to centralize power and dismiss the courts. Now, we're left wondering if those who have the power to act, like Congress, the vice president, and the cabinet, will muster the courage to intervene before it's too late. I want to clarify that I'm not suggesting Trump will resign next week or that the 25th Amendment will be put into action tomorrow. What I truly believe with every fiber of my being is that we're in a dicey situation here. Looking at everything unfolding in the courts, it's clear we're on a path that just can't keep going. A president can't continuously have his actions labeled unconstitutional by federal judges. It's not sustainable when a cabinet is accused of conspiring against the Constitution. And being called authoritarian from the bench won't help anyone's political future either. Something's got to give. Either Trump makes a significant change, which honestly seems unlikely given his track record over the last decade, or the system will step in using the options available in the Constitution, impeachment, the 25th Amendment, or when the pressure becomes too much, resignation. One of these outcomes is on the horizon. The only thing we're left wondering is when and which one it will be. Every ruling, like the recent one from Judge Young, brings us closer to that moment. If this video has given you a fresh perspective on the situation, feel free to hit that like button. And if you're not already part of this community, consider subscribing. Share this video with someone who really needs to grasp how serious this situation has gotten, especially since the mainstream media isn't handling it with the urgency it warrants. Catch you in the next